In 2017, two whistleblowers released over 100,000 emails to the South African press. The emails implicated the then president, Jacob Zuma, and a powerful family of wheeler dealers, the Guptas, of grand corruption, financial malpractice, and the ultimate state capture. This is the story of Jacob Zuma and the Gupta brothers, Ajay, Atul, and Rajesh. A relentless pursuit for riches, a reckless abandonment for what is sound and just, a grandiose display of arrogance, and a premeditated abuse of power. It reads like a script out of Hollywood. The unquenchable dust of villains to fail a state versus the gallant fight by the common South African to take their power back. The Guptas perfected state capture, teaming of spy chiefs and investigators, muting the official press and replacing it with propagandist network, auctioning the executive to bidders with large purses, running state-owned enterprises like a retirement kiosk, dangling obscene monies in front of regulators and auditors to obscure their judgment. The state capturers stole billions of rand meant for South Africa, barring millions of South Africans' futures to benefit one family of foreign loot artists, one family of the former president, and one group of traitors entrusted by the public as ministers and state enterprise CEOs, but sold their loyalty. Hello, welcome to the Financial Crimes Podcast. Subscribe, like, and comment your views and reviews. South Africa has the best people, but that cannot be said of its politicians. When the Guptas moved to South Africa from India in 1993, their sole intention was to exploit it, albeit with the help of local collaborators. Zuma was an ANC security chief by then, and a fast rising star. First, a deputy leader of ANC and then a deputy president. That is when the Guptas bet on him. More so not because he was a leader, but because he was a leader with questionable ethos. In 2005, he was accused of receiving bribes in a deal to buy frigates for the South African Navy. In 2006, he was accused of raping a HIV-positive daughter of a friend. Nonetheless, he still became the president of South Africa in 2009. He had already started doing business with the Guptas, using his family as a decoy. His son, Jacob Zuma, was a shareholder in all the companies that the Guptas used, and so was his twin Duduzile and their mother. Here are the top 7 ways that the Zumas and the Guptas captured the state, fleecing its citizens over 30 billion rand within 15 years. 1. Milking the Vred dairy farm. Imagine the government launching a 2.2 billion shillings farming project in a village with pomp and fanfare, and economic analysts arguing that the project will change the livelihood of that area, make it a milk and beef basket for the whole country, and directly provide a livelihood to over 1,000 families. But 1 year later, the cattle were dead, the equipment rusted, and the farm abandoned. Yet, the money was still being paid into the farm. That is what happened in South Africa. In February of 2013, the Free State government announced a plan to spend 340 million rand to build a dairy farm in a place called Vred. The new venture was part of an attempt by the government to create businesses run by the black people. The contract to run the farm, which was never put out to tender in the first place, was won by a company called Eskom, whose sole director was an IT salesman with no farming experience. It was one of the Gupta's easy pickings. The company should have plowed the same amount of money back into the scheme through buying animal feeds, employing workers, training farmers, processing milk, etc. But statements obtained by the media showed that this never happened. Estina was effectively a front for the Gupta family. The Free State government paid Estina 340 million rand, which was immediately transferred to other Gupta shell companies in the United Arab Emirates, and from there to 3 UAE-registered shell companies. And while the dairy cows were dying of starvation at the farm, the Guptas used the money in the most lavish way, a slap on the face of the suffering South Africans. The Guptas flew guests from India on an Airbus plane, which landed at an Air Force base at Waterkloof, forgive me for the pronunciation, normally reserved for military flights and heads of state. On touchdown, the partygoers were escorted by the same chase cars and security that accompanied the head of states. The guests arrived without the usual custom or immigration checks. This was to celebrate for 4 days the wedding of one of Gupta's nieces. The wedding was attended by Jacob Zuma, the son to Jacob Zuma, the first lady, and politicians who had an incline to the Guptas. And so deep were the pockets of the Guptas that the full loot was allowed as a tax-exempt expense by their auditors, KPMG. Number 2, the Immigrants saga. With South Africans' unemployment rate hitting 30%, it is unthinkable that a government could allow foreigners to move in freely and take all the jobs. The Guptas ran a group of companies under the Oak Bay umbrella, and instead of employing the local labor in a market that had a surplus of it, the Guptas imported their Indian counterparts. The process of employing a foreigner in South Africa is long and involves jumping a lot of legal hurdles. It will take up to 6 months for a foreigner to get a work permit. But by claiming that these employees were on intercompany transfer visa instead of general work visa applications, the Guptas only needed to show that these employees had been in the service of one of the Indian sister companies for a period of at least 6 months. They did this by falsifying and backdating the Indian employment contracts they had with these workers. This was, of course, in the full knowledge of the Immigration Department and with blessings by the President. In total, approximately 100 Indians were imported to work in South Africa illegally, with at least 40 working in the Gupta's newly formed media house, a TV station called ANN7, and a newspaper called The New Age Media. Number 3, the media takeover. In 2010, the Guptas started their media company, a TV station known as African News Network, ANN7, and the New Age Media newspaper, TNA. This was their propaganda machinery to alter the public's perception towards them and towards President Zuma and his cronies. From inception, it was clear that the company was not interested in playing a fair game. Its real aim was to be a front for receiving government money. And in its first year of operation, for instance, the president directed the communications director to channel the full 600 million rand of advertising budget by the government to the New Age newspaper and ANN7 TV. Number 4, the Gupta's puppets. The Guptas lived lavishly and with all the trappings of power. They led a shadow government in their state house-themed mansion in Saxon World. Politicians and business leaders thronged in and out, each time leaving with a bag full of cash, having sold their loyalty and morals. These are some examples. Temba Maseko was sacked as head of the government communication service because he refused to comply with the Gupta's directive to direct the government media spend to their media company. His replacement quickly played to their tune. Brian Molefe was headhunted by the Guptas to head the Transnet so that the Guptas could get all the tenders' kickbacks. He was also posted to another state-owned enterprise, Eskom, where he facilitated their coal supply deals. Nanlan Nene was sacked as the finance minister because he was hindering Zuma's nuclear deal with Russia. In his place, a Gupta lieutenant, David Van Rooyen, was appointed the finance minister. The mines minister, Mosibenzi Zwane, was bought so that he could facilitate the purchase of a coal mine by the Guptas and the subsequent awarding of multi-billion rand tenders by Eskom. He was also the one who facilitated the Vrend dairy farm contract to a Gupta farm when he was agricultural minister in Free State province. Malusi Jigamba, the minister for state companies, was responsible for appointing Gupta-linked individuals in senior roles at the state-owned enterprises, including Transnet, Eskom, Danel, and others, while he was the public enterprise minister from November 2010 to May 2014. He was also involved in the fraudulent granting of South African citizenship to members of Gupta's family. Faith Mutambi was the most loyal of Gupta lieutenants. She was the Minister for Communication in 2014. She was actively discussing cabinet meetings with the Gupta brothers and Zuma's son, Duduzane. She made compromise decisions that led to the national broadcaster, SABC, making losses and delaying in its analog to digital migration. The funds that were supposed to support the national broadcaster were diverted by her to Gupta's media house. Number 5. The Transnet billions. Having secured the loyalty of top brass politicians and state enterprise CEOs, it was time for the Guptas to play in the big leagues. South Africa has used state-owned enterprises for economic development, in particular to expand productive capacities and foster economic growth. The SEOs are commercial organizations that are particularly rich and enjoy monopoly statuses. These were the real gold mines in a country with vast gold reserves. Transnet is a state-owned enterprise in South Africa comprising of rail transport, ports management, fuel pipelines, and engineering companies. It is headquartered in Johannesburg and it is one of the largest companies in South Africa. On 17th of March 2014, the then Transnet CEO, Brian Molefe, who had been appointed as a Gupta enabler, announced contracts with 4 international manufacturing companies to build 1,064 locomotives. Molefe misled the Transnet board into approving the costs. Molefe and 3 others increased the locomotive deal by at least 16 billion rand. This was to accommodate the Gupta's kickbacks. The kickbacks were then laundered through the Gupta's shell companies in UAE, Hong Kong, and other places. Today, Transnet is in an ongoing legal battle against about 60,000 ex-workers who have instituted a class action lawsuit now estimated to be more than 80 billion rand for the mismanagement and plunder of their pension funds. Number 6. The Eskom crippling. Eskom, Electricity Supply Commission, is a state-owned monopoly in South Africa dealing with power generation, transmission, and distribution. It was once ranked 7th worldwide in terms of capacity, and for a long time, South Africans enjoyed the lowest power costs in the world and also the most reliable power supplier. That was well until Zuma's administration. The Guptas were able to influence 2 key decisions. 1, Brian Molefe, the same guy at Transnet, to become the new CEO at Eskom. And 2, Mosebenzi Zwane was appointed the Minister for Mineral Resources. The CEO and the minister engineered a very hostile takeover of one of the coal mines, Glencoe. Eskom started levying a huge fine on Glencoe for supplying allegedly under-quality coal and refusing to negotiate on prices. Eventually, Eskom effectively helped buy the mine by paying Thegupta in advance for its coal. It also reduced the fine once Thegupta took over. During this period, phone records obtained by the public protector showed that Molefe, the CEO, and Ajay Gupta traded more than 50 calls. Thegupta was thereafter awarded a 4 billion rand contract to supply coal to the state electricity firm. So lucrative were these deals that the young Duduzane bought himself a Porsche. It's neither here nor there to say that this Porsche killed someone while Duduzane was racing across the streets. He also had an apartment in Dubai at the magnificent Burj Khalifa. A report compiled by Eskom and G9 Forensic found that the two consulting firms, including Gupta's owned Trillion, made 1.6 billion rand in fees with an additional 7.8 billion rand made from future contracts. Today, the mine is no longer working, denying Eskom a critical raw material for its power production, coal. Subsequently, for the last 15 years, South Africans have suffered blackouts and power rationing or load shedding. Today, Eskom is also operating at a loss of over 20 billion rand and is saddled by debts of over 400 billion rands. Number 7. Danel sabotages. Danel is a state-owned enterprise in South Africa, a commercially driven company and a strategic partner for innovative defense, security, and related technology solutions. Its mandate is to manufacture, test, and supply arms and weapons to markets all over the world. That is, utility and attack helicopters, anti-tank and air defense missiles, long-range guns, etc. Their clients included NASA, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, India, Chad, among others. When the company got a contract with Saudi Arabia in 2013 for 8.3 billion rand to supply the Royal Saudi Land Forces with G6 artillery, the Guptas wanted a kickback deal to be signed first. When the company got a contract for a deal worth 22 billion rand with Danel, where Danel was expected to sign in order to supply T5 artillery to India's Ministry of Defense in 2015, the Guptas wanted a cut. Both deals fell through when the foreign arms companies could not agree on the terms of kickbacks to be signed with the Guptas. Hence, South Africa lost 30 billion worth of opportunities. Today, Danel, the state-owned enterprise, is facing bankruptcy, operating at a net loss of 2 billion rand and has been unable to pay its staff and pensioners for the past 2 years. It was not until 2018, when Jacob Zuma resigned from the presidency, that South Africans breathed a sigh of relief from these blatant gluttons. Thanks to the South African media for investigating and publishing these atrocities, and thanks to the whistleblowers who released the emails, famously known as the Gupta leaks. South Africans are still waiting for justice to be served, while Africa and the rest of the world is watching to avoid another state capture. Until the next episode, keep vigil.